Are you too busy, too stressed out, unhealthy? Then this is the place for you. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, where we help you create wellness and balance with a holistic approach that will work for you, even with the busiest of schedules, so you can live the life you want. And now, here's your host, Diane Randall.
Hello and welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This episode is Interrupting Patterns of Behavior That No Longer Serve You. I'm Diane Randall, your host. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you're new to the show, welcome. It's really great to have you here listening. Balanced Living for Busy Professionals provides the best inner tools and strategies to help you break free of any habits, patterns, or attitudes that may be keeping you stuck in place. It doesn't matter how busy your schedule is, you can make changes and create the life you truly want. Today's episode is so special because we're always talking about habits and patterns and breaking free. I have the perfect guest to talk about that subject today. My guest will talk about how to interrupt patterns and change behaviors so that you can live your best life. We all have experienced patterns of behavior that show up again and again with the same outcome. I know I have plenty of times. We notice the patterns of behavior that don't serve our highest good and the feelings that come forward over and over again until we finally realize that something has to change. My guest, Jon Cheplak, real estate expert, coach, motivational speaker, and the author of the book, Interrupt the Pattern, The Path to Your Highest Self. Welcome, Jon.
Well, thank you so much, Diane. It's a privilege to be here with you and share.
Well, I am excited that you're here to just share with us today because I firsthand learned what repeating patterns are. But I want to know, and the listeners want to know, what inspired you to do this specific work?
Well, I seem to take things to the extreme, Diane. Alcoholism did it. And It was the repetition from 21. I spent my most people are excited. I get 21. I'm 21 years old and I've got ID and I can go have a drink. And I was in an alcohol rehabilitation facility at 21 years old.
Wow.
And I repeated that over and over again until 41, a total of about 9 times. And so if you do the math in there from 21 to 41, it was quite an interesting series of misadventures for me. So, and then because I could never stay clean. I would always, do just enough to function at a high level in business and kind of manipulate around in life. I really struggled in that personal level. And I'd get going for a couple of years at maximum, and then I'd go, sideways again. So after, I just knew this time at 41 years old, I'm 50 now. Mm-hmm. So I knew about 3 years after being clean this time, and just the path that I had chosen. Number one, I knew to continue to grow as a human being. The number one thing is to contribute. Number two, I knew that I was not alone. Number three, I knew that, it's interesting. People get slotted for whatever pattern it is, no matter how small or big. It's big because it's their pattern and it's all related. And so I wanted to share, I wanted to give back, take people on a journey to understand, why we do the same thing over and over and over again. And we know better. So that was my inspiration, and it's the rewarding work outside of the business stuff that I do every single day today.
Wow. And this is a very, very powerful topic because you have the same patterns that show up over and over again. And sometimes you don't recognize it. But even when you recognize it, like you said, it's not something you go, oh, okay, I'm just going to stop doing. I'm just going to stop drinking, for example. So it's almost like you have to have some deeper awareness that this needs to change because my life is really stuck right here?
Yes, we're so conflicted. And, and whether, Diane, too, it's whether it's the type of relationship that we choose of a significant other. We've all found not all, but many people find themselves, how did I get back in this spot again?
It's so funny you mentioned that. I teach a workshop and I tell this story to my participants all the time, how I had 4 of the exact same relationships before I recognized that I was a common denominator and all these guys are the same. It's just the faces had changed.
Yes.
And that was my first and biggest awakening. I think I was almost 40 years old. And I said, it's me. It's not them, because I'd say to myself, why do they like me? Why do they keep choosing me? So that was a big, big, big moment for me when I got that, oh my God, it's me. So what if people just aren't familiar with their patterns?
Well, I think that the first thing to ask yourself is, take a look at your life and, what keeps showing up that doesn't work for you. I mean, one of the things I tell people is put your hand on your heart, and I have them go through an exercise. Put your hand on your heart and feel that thing. It's beating in there. Now just close your eyes and think about the things that make it beat really hard in a good way and get you excited and make you feel good. And when was the last time that you felt that way? And now you don't, maybe. And what is it? Now start reflecting, what things are in the way? What are the obstructions to it? What doesn't feel good? Sometimes it's just simply not even looking at the pattern, because thinking about, just like you said, it was so good. You took that personal responsibility and said, wait a minute, this isn't about everyone else. It's about me. I think it's taken real personal responsibility and doing a self-examination. Okay, my life's pretty good, but what are some things I could change? Well, these are some things that really I used to really enjoy, and I don't do them anymore. And then say, okay, how come I'm not doing those things? What gets in the way of that? And then you'll start to see that something has replaced it, and it's not, in your highest and best purpose. It doesn't have your highest and best purpose in mind. And many times we find it's a pattern. Many times we find it's a pattern.
It's a pattern, but in our society, we're conditioned to blame other people. So how do you get people to take 100% responsibility for their life without, well, he did this to me, she did this to me, they did this to me?
Well, there's a few things, and I go back to you, and it just makes me smile when I hear your discovery, because it's the same for me too, Diane, until I finally just said, no one did anything to me. I created it. The first thing that I say is personal responsibility. And as you well know, Diane, it is the highest form of human emotional maturity when we can really move and look in the mirror every day and say, no matter what has happened, I created this. So I go back to my teachings, and I've had amazing teachers that have contributed so much generous, so generous in their teachings with me is, if you want control of your life, you must learn to give up power. If you want control in your life, you must try your very, very best to give up power. I mean, we're trying so much. It's more of going with the flow. And then when you start talking about that, people say, oh, that's the woo woo and the kumbaya and the this and that. And I say, well, keep trying, attach to the process of what's going on, not the outcome. I think, that's the next piece is look at your outcomes right now and detach from them, because when we go out to the future, we lose our power.
Yeah.
When we go to the past, we lose our power. All we have power in is right now. So number one, own everything. Number two, what I share with people is I talk to them a lot about karma. You'll hear people say, I don't want bad karma or I want good karma. And I think our definition of things in society also is we've just been misguided. Karma is an opportunity to bring things forward for us to cleanse, clean, clear, and make right. So when we start with personal responsibility and say, hey, I'm going to own the fact that, I haven't taken care of my health and I've struggled with it, and I go on a diet and I get off a diet, or I pick this relationship, or I keep drinking, or this or that. The first part is recognizing it and saying, what's happening that's getting in the way of the life I want to experience. Now here's the other part real quickly though, Diane, that's interesting. I'm sure you found it. You ever sit down and ask people, a big group of people, what makes you happy? A lot of people don't know.
Right. Oh, well, we're conditioned to think that something out there external makes me happy. That's how we're conditioned. And it's really, I feel, an unlearning that we have control, which is one reason I do this show, is to say, you don't have to buy anything. You have everything you need, because that's been my experience. I don't have to buy anything to lose weight, for example, like you said, healthy. I can learn tools and learn how to feel good about myself, learn how to break patterns that just don't serve me, and just eat better, even though things are outside of my control. I can look at what is in my control, just like you just said.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that, it's really, the foundation of it all is personal responsibility and really owning it. But understanding to stand in our power. What we then go underneath that, it's called boundaries and attachments. Boundaries and attachments. And so I do this stacking, first thing that we, and I'll tell people this is, at some point in time, if you're going to work with me or have a relationship, a friendship, or a business relationship, I'm not saying that you have to today, but you've got to arrive to the space of personal responsibility. In other words, owning everything. Because if you're not willing to do that, it doesn't matter if I am Tony Robbins. Nothing's going to change.
Right.
Nothing's going to change. And then with that being able to do a self-examination and looking at, what makes you feel good and identifying it. And then what are you doing now that's getting in the way of that? And then now, when we start inspecting, and so we've had this awareness, we start inspecting and examining the pattern that has shown up. Okay, so where do I need to create a boundary? Where do I need to create a boundary? I'll give you an example, Diane. When I'm on the road speaking, a client will say, hey, let's go to dinner the night before. And it's funny how this kind of all comes in line with the fitness thing. And, most would think that's the right thing to do. Politically correct. We're programmed. Gosh, if someone's flying you out, well, they're flying me out to speak tomorrow.
Right.
No, they're not flying me out to go to dinner.
Right.
But society tells us, a common conversation, Diane, you and I'd sit here and think, that's the right thing to do. You should do that. No. And so what I said to my client is, I said, no, I can't make it. Oh, what do you got calls? No, I'm going to the gym. You're going to the gym? Yes. You have brought me out to bring my absolute best. And part of my ritual is being healthy. And so now we start getting into rituals. So right now, what we've talked about, Diane, is we've talked about boundaries. We've talked about attachment, because most would be attached to what they might think. Most would be attached to the fact that client might tell someone else in the industry, we brought this guy out to speak and paid him this money, and he wouldn't go to dinner with us. My goodness. And he wanted to go to the gym. He's a meathead,
right.
Or whatever. So you look at boundaries, the principle of boundaries, the principle of attachments, not being attached to what anyone would think, not being attached to making them unhappy, not being attached to the fact that maybe they never want to do business with you again. I release myself from that.
And don't you feel, well, I feel that you have to have courage to be able to stand in your life and feel empowered that way.
Well, you do. And you know what? My opinion to what takes it away from our courage are the other things in life that we're attached to. And they all bridge together, because what is it that would make you so concerned about that affecting your business? Well, the fact of that, you just don't have a confidence that you stand in your integrity of who you are, what you do, and what you stand for. But then people are attached to, quite frankly, the financial situation they've put themselves in, because they had to buy this house, or they had to buy that car, or they had to do things to please everyone else, which creates this amazing pressure, which then also has its trickle down effect on where people can create boundaries with their time.
I hear you when you say that, because on average, many people feel when it comes to work that there are no boundaries on their time. If there's a project, maybe instead of leaving at 5, I'm going to leave at 7. I'm not going to take a lunch. I'm just going to order pizza so that I can get this done because this person is paying me.
Yes.
And not building in the boundaries and the priorities that you just talked about.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And in the end, resentment shows up, all those things. There's resentment. There's, I think the most important thing is to, what we're not clear on up front in situations too, are our expectations. And then if an expectation is compromised in any relationship, then we're, again, attached to the outcome. And so we're afraid to be, I'm not saying people are liars, but we're afraid to be truthful. Because again, see, attachments cause us to lack integrity with ourselves.
Yes.
And the interesting thing, whether it's in a personal relationship, a job, open communication and not being attached to the outcome is the most powerful thing on the planet. It just really is. And it gives us freedom.
And you said freedom, and I still feel I'm a work in process, but that is exactly my idea of freedom. Not being attached to people, things, and everything that's going on in the world. I don't owe anyone anything. I owe it to myself. I love that. I love that. So if there's someone listening and hearing you say, and hearing you talk about boundaries, how would they get started if they are just so terrified at the thought of setting a boundary or a priority or an expectation that someone may have of them?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the first thing to do is again, choosing to own everything in your life. And then looking at what makes you happy and what's, creating the condition where you're not happy. And then looking at what, where you need to create a boundary, where you need to say no. The most powerful word we have is no. I mean, in the right context. And then inspecting what we have an attachment to. And then further, peeling back, that skin of that onion, going down to the deep layers. And then start looking into fear and what has created that. And where we typically find it, Diane, is sure, we may have made some decisions in life right now where I'm going to stay in this relationship because I'm supposed to be in a relationship. I'm going to stay married because it will look terrible. Everyone would judge me, all those types of things. Whatever it may be. Ironically, everything goes back to our childhood somewhere.
Yes, it does.
I tell people this: everything is connected to a cord. So right now, if you're sitting here in this space of, okay, I've identified it all. I'm ready to take this journey and really do some self-examination. Is to then identify where you're at in current space and time in that. I'd say an unwillingness. The fear is sitting there. Now go backwards in time and look at where or when that belief was created. Was it an experience? Was it what you were told? Is it something that has to do with self-worth? I was working with a client earlier this week and just a competent, wonderful human being. And we peeled it all back. And I said, were you ever good enough for your dad? And he said, never. And so that programming, when the brain is so malleable, we don't understand it. We don't believe it, but that unconscious, drives the bus. The unconscious mind drives the bus. And so, he would get to one spot and get stuck and then revert back to form, get to one spot and get stuck and revert back to form. And it went back to that moment. So what is it? Where was it that something happened or you were told that created a belief that is absolutely false? Because we are all good enough. We are all good enough.
We are good enough, but as you know, the messaging that we hear, the programming that comes out of media and everywhere else tells us every day that we're not. So it takes a lot of work to hear these things and not take them in, because these are hammered on us every day. You're too fat. You're not good enough. You need this to look good. You need this to think better. It's constant all the time. So what do we do to shut those outside influences out that tell us that we're not good enough?
Sure. I mean, the beauty industry is notorious for this. I mean, the beauty industry just continues to manipulate women. If you don't do this, buy this, or look like this, you're no good. I mean, it's terrible. But the first thing that we need to do is we need to come back to those boundaries. And I'll go a little bit extreme, Diane.
Okay.
I got TV. I took the TV out of my house 3.5 years ago. And I say extreme because some people, they think about losing the TV and taking it out of their house. Oh my gosh, we could never do that. But you talked about it. TV is, they pay copywriters and advertisers millions of dollars, billions is spent to manipulate our brain, to make us not feel good enough so that we buy. It's capitalism at its greatest.
Well, I can share with you that I didn't take the TV out, but I don't watch it. I may watch a recorded program or something with no commercials. Mm-hmm. But I tell you, since I've done that, I feel that I'm even more present in my life, and I don't have all the negative thoughts that I may have had in the past, because I don't have all these things going in my head all day long with commercials and the news or whatever we want to call it these days, telling me that all these bad things are happening every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think it's, looking at, and again, it's examining another boundary. It is, looking at where I need to create a boundary and asking yourself too, going back to what makes me happy and am I doing it? And no, I'm not, because I don't have enough time. And then what I'll tell people to do is take and do a time study. Take 168 hours out of the day and really track it for a week and look at the time. Because many times when people start looking at, I'm not able to do things, it's because of time. Well, no, it's not because of time. It's because you are choosing to do things that don't serve you with the time that you have. Okay. And many of the things that you're choosing to do that don't serve you are fillers. They're things that do the temporary feel good to mask the things that, don't feel good in our life, to mask the things that give us pressure, to mask the things that give us stress. I mean, tension is a very good thing because tension causes creativity, but there's this fine line that most people, cross over, and it's that fine line of stress, and stress shuts us down. And when we get shut down, then we get back in the pattern. But, with all those principles in mind, the number one thing to do, pen to paper. People talk about journaling, but going underneath it, pen to paper is the most powerful thing on the planet that we can do. Write these things out. The conversation that you and I are having, Diane, and going through this, and someone's listening to it, pull out a pen and a piece of paper and write these things out. Write out right now, what makes you happy, what's going on that you're not happy about, And, what are you attached to? Is there self-worth issues? And we find it in, like Diane said, listen, we all have those thoughts. We all look in the mirror in the morning because it's the duality. It's our shadow and think I'm not good enough. My house isn't big enough. My car isn't cool enough. I'm too skinny. I'm too fat. I'm too short. I'm too tall. We all do that. But it's learning to embrace that. But pull out a pen and piece of paper and write these things out. Why write these things out? Because we need to see our thoughts. We need to see our thoughts. The little voice inside of us tells us things, but then when we see our thought and we write it out, many times what happens psychologically, there's a psychological thing that takes place in it, and it's us, when we take that pen to paper, is we're getting it outside of us. We're releasing it. And then when we release it and we start seeing our thought, and we see, I did this exercise with a client yesterday, and I said, write out what you just said. They'd sent me a text message that was kind of self-defeating. And actually I said, write that out and reread it. And they came back to me and go, that's not true. I go, well, that's what you're saying about yourself.
Because isn't it very unconscious when we do things like that?
Oh, yeah. So now, yes. So now what we get to do is we get to go back and say, where was the program created? Where was the program created? It was created here. And then we get to look at it and say, is it really a truth, or was it at a point where I was so easily influenced, and, my parents were doing the best that they could, or whoever, or even a significant other. I mean, many people have a traumatic breakup in a relationship, or someone gets fired from a job, or, anything where there's rejection. We can have 30 people tell us we're beautiful and one person say you're terrible and ugly person, and we hold on to the one. So that's why it's important to write these things out. Write down the things that you're telling yourself that are negative. People say, well, I should only write the affirmations. I'm wonderful. No, see what you're telling yourself. So number one, get it outside of you by writing it out. Number two, see your thoughts. Number three, then inspect and examine and say, is that really true? Or is it something I chose to believe because what I heard? Is it something I chose to believe because what I experienced? And then the next piece is to say, well, I did hear it, I did experience it, and it's from someone that was, my mother, my father, an authority figure, someone I loved. Well, we don't know what they're going through, and now we get to understand the law of projection. And the law of projection states this, that, what someone's telling you, projecting at you, they're telling you something about themselves.
And that has helped me so much in my later life, is to recognize that. And that cuts down on a lot of external fights, a lot of things. I actually end up having more compassion for the person in a lot of cases, is because I recognize that in that person. So good. So good. Because now we come into that power control game again. Because, we may hear it, and either we ball up and, we're milk toast and we move away from it and we carry it, or we choose to go into conflict with the person and engage and go down to their vibration level. Or the third one is, and we're not taught this so much, is the third one is to seek, good old Stephen Covey's, seek to understand. I don't know what they're going through. They're telling me something about themselves, and that's where the magic is. But if we're willing to take personal responsibility and look at all of these things that show up in our life, and then finally, too, ready? Here's the other piece that's really beautiful when those people show up that have created this program, that have put us into this pattern that has us probably what I call, we may be in a pattern, but it's perpetual, and we're paralyzed. Is the final piece is seeing them as our mirror. Because they are.
They are.
They really are.
They are. And they're showing us one of two things. Something in ourself that we don't like about self, that we know we need to clean up, or a past experience that we've had with someone or doing something that we're still carrying the vibration of the energy of making a part of us, and we haven't released it. So when we now start looking at other human beings as everyone has their own dramas and traumas, the law of projection, what people are trying to point out at you, they're telling you about themselves, recognizing that everyone's a mirror. We pull towards us, just like you with your relationships. It was beautiful. You pulled those 4 people forward to you to evolve your soul. You did, because it was something that was in you for some reason to pull those people forward. And our higher being knew that, your higher being knew that, hey, that was an area that you needed to uncover.
Yes.
And so they were gifts.
They were gifts.
They were gifts.
I could say that today, but years ago that I wouldn't have said. I wouldn't have quite looked at it like that.
No, I believe you know that one well, right? Easy in principle.
Right.
And so now, and so people hearing this too, because you can choose to do that, or I think what's really neat about this and breaking it, as we're talking about some deep subjects and principles. Here's what I'd say to your audience that really breaks it down simple. And it goes to the memes that we see around the internet all the time, all the quotes and all that stuff.
Right.
And I know that many of your listeners have heard or seen this one, that which we resist persists.
Yes. That's a powerful one.
And that's the pattern. And so if we don't want to, now going backwards, if we don't want to take personal responsibility, if we don't want to do the painful self-examination, because with some people it's a traumatic experience. I've worked with people that have been abused in many different forms, and they stay in a pattern that's self-destructive to either medicate that or to avoid it or to acknowledge it, that that's all that their worth is. And the only way to break through it is to go back and inspect and examine it. And so, if people aren't willing to face it, then it's going to continue. That's resisting it.
And
it's resisting.
That's what I tell people is it will never go away. They're like, well, it's so painful. I don't want to go there. And I say, that's exactly where we need to go, because that's where the healing is.
Yes, indeed.
So
we'll continue to do this.
So what about self-forgiveness in all these principles? Where does that fit in?
Mm-hmm. Well, then I go to another mantra of those experiences that we had is a knowing, just like you shared too, is first of all, we got to look at, and you don't have to believe it, just trust that other people believe in it, trust that Diane believes this, trust that I believe in this, is that it was brought forward to move you to your higher self. And one of the things that I say all the time is constantly examine it until you get it. And there's times when things show up in my life today, is to ask yourself, how is this here to evolve my soul? How is this here to evolve my soul? How is this here to evolve my soul?
What's the lesson?
And, what's the lesson? What's the lesson? What's the lesson? And you don't have to, you don't have to accept it right now. But what you do is keep asking it, and then you can get a new program in there. It's a new program. And there's times, I have things show up, and I've told people there's times where I have to say it all day long. Something will show. How is this here to teach me? What's this here to teach me? How to, what part of me that I'm trying to evolve has brought this forward for me to grow and learn from? And so we come back to, some mantras and some personal responsibility.
But what I love is if you can look at it that way, then you can sit with it and really process it versus looking outside yourself as what that other person is trying to do to me, because that's a distraction. I feel that's throwing you off.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. That's it. That's it's all, things we're talking about are very simple in theory, just okay, dot to dot. And you know what? If you stay in it, you'll get through it, but you've got to get through it to get to it. You can't go around it. Because if what I share with people is this, Diane, and this is the best analogy, I'll always ask people, if you delete something in your computer right now, where does it go? You want to delete it. You want it to disappear. Well, it sits in your computer. It's still there. It's still there. The FBI can come into and still goes into people's houses. They want anything. You can't delete anything off your computer. It's there, Well, the brain works the same way. So it's still sitting there. So what it is what I tell, call it forward. Because if you don't call it forward, it will show up. Our shadow will show up in our darkest of spaces.
Oh, yeah.
In our darkest of spaces. So it's learning to kind of, as you can hear it in your voice too. It's learning to love, accept, and embrace yourself for, oh yeah, I was the common denominator. I was the one. So understanding that this, and it's a tough principle to get, is that write it down. Your magic is in your darkness. Your breakthrough is in the breakdown. And do a little research. Oh, again, it's that, these principles, and I've heard it before, I've read it before. Well, do a little research on some of the most amazing humans on the planet and their accomplishments and contributions to the world. If you investigate and examine something traumatic or a drama happened in their life that brought them to the space they're in to do the work they do today, constantly. You can inspect and examine, just like you shared your story with relationships, those type of things. We were raised, you're not good enough.
Right.
And it was tough, and we were programmed we weren't good enough.
And it manifested in all kinds of ways.
Oh, sure. Socially, it's interesting, I get in front of crowds throughout the world and speak, and I was socially uncomfortable. I didn't think I was good enough. And so for me, my pattern, some people, it's, we all just pick a different medication. That's all. Mine was alcohol. Some people it's food. Some people it's, the TV, it's bad relationships, whatever it may be. But it's, really examining, all aspects of what's showing up and accepting every part of you. Someone asked me, Jon, I looked at the statistics. People don't stay sober past 5 years. 95% roughly don't stay sober past 5 years. And you're at 8 years. How do you do it? And I tell them this: I keep the darkness. I keep the painful moments so very, very close to me, and so that I don't carry the most wasted emotion of regret or resentment. I know that, and look at, and I can go back to situations and experiences and know that those that cause me pain allow me to be where I'm at today, spending time with you and hopefully contributing to someone that's listening to this.
Wow. Well, you've certainly given us a lot of excellent things that we can do in our own lives to interrupt the patterns that show up over and over and over again. I think it's truly freedom once you can release a lot of things that just don't serve you anymore. It allows you to just show up so full and light in the world. That's been my experience, at least.
You're dead on. Absolutely.
So, Jon, I want to thank you for being on the show today and just bringing your wisdom, the awareness to how we can interrupt and change patterns of behavior that keep us from showing up fully in our lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. You can subscribe to the Balanced Living for Busy Professionals podcast by visiting www.balancelivingforbusyprofessionals.com. It's so easy to listen while you drive, take the train, or walk to work. I want you to tune in to hear more health and wellness experts in episodes designed to help you improve your life no matter how busy your schedule. You can really create the life you want. I want to hear from you. Leave your comments, questions, or voicemail on the Balanced Living for Busy Professionals website, or send me an email at feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Your feedback helps us to bring the best topics and information to help you make the changes that you really want in your life.
Thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This podcast is sponsored by DianeRandallConsults.com. If you like this show, the best way to support it is by leaving 5-star feedback on iTunes. And please feel free to email your questions, comments, and suggestions to feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Until next week, namaste.